Welcome to the first in our series course this month. So the library's been here 130 years, so we thought it was a good opportunity to have some authors in and encourage you all to carry on reading and using the space. So this evening we've got Wyl Menmuir, and we have our question master, Frank, who has agreed to pose any questions, but feel free, I think, to join in with the questioning. I hope you enjoy the evening. Thank you.
With a respectful hand up.
A lot of questions our way.
Yeah, bring it on. 130 years, what do you think of libraries? And
what do I think of libraries? That's a great first question. How's ever asked me that's my first question? What do I think of libraries? I love libraries. I love libraries. I've always loved libraries. When I was little, I had a library about half a mile from home, up a big hill, and I would go at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, and I went so often that they gave me, because we had a ticket, like those little tickets, and you used to put the ticket in the ticket, and they gave me a double number of tickets because they knew that I'd be coming sort of every day otherwise, and they really, it was the first place I met an author, was my local library. And that author was a man called Robert Westall, who wrote a book called The Machine Gunners. And I'd read that book, and I think before I met him, I thought that authors were like people who were other, like people who lived in, well, they'd definitely gone to Oxford or Cambridge, and they lived in some sort of medieval tower, and they didn't really talk to mortal people, because I thought what they did was magic. Genuinely, that's my experience of reading. It's like this, how can you use these scribbles on a page to transport people to a completely different place? And I met Robert Westall, and in the best possible way, he was dead ordinary. He looked a bit like my granddad, and he talked to me like a normal person. And when I said, I think I told him that I wanted to be a writer, he said, so we'll start writing then. You can do that. He said, that's what I did. I just started writing stories down. And so my library was kind of this, was like this hub for me. It was a safe place. It was a safe place where you could go and, I mean, I'm a bit weird, so it was a safe place where I could go and be weird. I didn't know how libraries worked either. So when I was about 9, I decided I was going to read the library. So I started at A. And I was about 10 years old, and it's funny how quickly, like I remember some of those books in the A's. I remember Virginia Andrews, Flowers in the Attic, anyone? 10-year-olds should not read Flowers in the Attic. It's a scar for the young mind. So I read loads and loads of really unsuitable stuff, but the librarians always kind of they had an eye on you, and they'd make recommendations, and yeah, I love libraries. That was a long answer to a really short question.
that's a good sign for me that I'm not going to be doing a lot this evening.
Sorry, Frank.
It's okay. It's been a really eventful week for you. You've been, you've won an award. Tell us about the award, please.
I found out that I've won my first international award, which is dead exciting. I like how that grew. Yeah. Very good. Kind of sort of went around a little circle. And then
it would have been embarrassing if it hadn't, if it had just been like 1 or 2 people and everybody else was like, yeah, maybe not.
If you want to be the person who claps, don't listen to anyone around you, keep going. The award is called the Planet Literature Award, and it's awarded by the Blue Met Foundation in Quebec. And so in a couple of weeks, they're flying me out to Montreal, and apparently I've got to dress smartly. He's massively outdressing me this evening. I realised that I ought to up my game. So what I've done is, in the last couple of days, I've gone out and I've bought a kilt in my family's tartan. and a proper kilt jacket, and I've got a spine wheel and a skin dew, which I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get through customs. And so they want me to dress smartly. I will dress smartly. I want it this evening though, because Frank's wearing a bow tie, massively upstaged. Anyway, there we go. And that award is for my body of work, which is really nice. It's not for one book. It's for so it's for a body of work that, I can't remember what the wording is, that highlights the beauty of the living world and its fragility, and opens conversations, which kind of is what I aim to do, is all of those things. It's like somebody written an award for me. And the only other people who have won it are Robert McFarlane, nice, and Peter Volder, who's a forester and a brilliant writer who's written loads of books about trees and woodlands. And so I feel in really good company. And I'm dead excited to go to Montreal as well. So there you go, that's there. It's been a busy week.
Also, in the post today, you received the first ever copy of The Spirit of Stone, which is your book that's out in June.
So this arrived in the post today, and I was really, really hoping that it would arrive today because I wanted to bring it here because look at them. Look at them, they're a trilogy and they look beautiful together, and if you kind of move them in the light they all sparkle, and it makes me very happy because this represents, I said six years of work, it's actually more than 6 years of work has gone into these, and these have been my life for the last few years, and it feels quite weird that it's finished, but brilliant.
Well, it's not finished yet because you're going to have to sell the book to people, aren't you? You're going to have to be travelling the country.
Look how beautiful they are, don't sell themselves. I am going to be once it comes out, so it comes out in June, and I will be going on the road and doing loads of bookshop tours and doing loads of festivals this year. So yes, I'll be talking about it a lot. So any questions you ask today, this is kind of prep, so ask me the really difficult ones, get them out of the way, and prepare me for what is to come.
So which one story from the new book are you particularly looking forward to telling people about?
Oh, which one story? I don't know. So each of these books is personal in different ways. So there's sort of family stories in each one. Draw of the Sea is kind of more about my relationship with the sea. The Heart of the Woods has got a lot of my dad in it and my son, because my dad planted a woodland, and my son has a really special relationship with that woodland as well. And in this, I start the book on Mull, which is where my mum's family are from, on the west coast of Scotland. They come from Oban, and we have family on the islands. So I start on Mull and then on Iona, and that's really nice that there's quite a lot of personal family stuff in it. But in terms of the stories themselves, wow, I don't know.
I was wondering if maybe you'd become a druid because of seeing lots of stone circles, or if you've become a hermit because you're in the caves.
I'm definitely part druid.
Oh, you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to get mystical with the stones. And I did have a weird experience, so I'm quite happy to be druidy in one sense, but I'm also quite sceptical about an awful lot of things. And so when people tell me what stones mean and what stone circles mean, I always take it slightly with a pinch of salt. And one of the chapters is about fugus. Do you all know fugus? I don't. So I spent a week. Weirdly, bizarrely, I happened to be teaching a writing course in a house that has a fugu in the garden near Lamorna. And so every evening I go down to the fugu and spend a bit of time with it. And the people I was with, they were all fascinated by it, or had been before, and some of them had spent time there with different groups and had done lots of chanting there and things like that. was great. And on the first evening I went down, when everyone had arrived, I thought I was alone until I got quite close up, and then I could hear chanting coming out of the food. It was brilliant. And some of the women on the course had gone down and they were chanting this amazing chant. And so later on I said, well, am I allowed to join? And so we went down in the middle of the night. We did chanting in the food. That was great. And then someone had brought like flowers, and they'd brought candles and things like that to bring down into this hole in the ground. And lots of them had talked about feeling presences there. I really want to feel a presence. I want to see a ghost, I want to see a spirit, I want to see something like that. But I think at the same time, my sceptical mind kind of gets in the way. Because one of the days we went up to the Merry Maidens, and there was 2 people who were dowsing, and they were amazing people, and they didn't just have one set of dowsing rods, they had like 20 sets of dowsing rods in their backpack. So they gave us all dowsing rods and said we should all have a go. And everyone could do it, everyone could douse the stones, apart from me. And Ken, who was the person who was doing the dowsing, spent a lot of time with me saying, well, what I want you to do is I want you to relax, I want you to relax, and I want you just to get yourself in the zone. And he said, it will work, everyone can douse. Everybody can douse. And he watched me do it for about half an hour, and he said, you can't douse. He said, it means you're very special. And he said, are you a scientist, a really serious scientist? And no, I'm not. I'm a writer. I should be susceptible to these things. I should be open-minded. He was like, yeah. He said, let's just say you're very special. Anyway, on the last night we were there, everyone was having supper, and I needed to leave in the middle of winter, and so it's pitch black. And I thought I'll visit the food room one last time, see if I can feel anything there. So I went down, turned off my light, stood in the dark and waited for something to happen. And all of a sudden there was just this right in the chamber with me. And there was no one else there. It's only a 12-metre chamber, and it's also anacoustic, so sound from the outside doesn't get in, sound from the inside doesn't really get out. And I turned on my light as quickly as possible, and there was nothing in that chamber with me, but there definitely had been something there, and I felt it. I felt it in the air. And there's a brilliant story attached to that particular, it's Belai Fugu. Is one of the stories attached to it is that hares have often been seen going into the fugu, but never seen leaving. And it was the sound of a rabbit or a hare running along the ground. It was brilliant, so I was thrilled. So I had some sort of weird experience that could go in the book.
And it is in the book?
That is in the book,
oh,
yeah.
Fantastic.
But I can't read you that bit because I've just told you the story.
So is there a piece in the book that you'd like to read to us?
Okay, well, I'll tell you, let's open it to the audience. So I'm going to give you choices. How about... So you can have a bit from A Pilgrimage to Sacred Stones on Iona in Scotland. You could have something about the artistic and spiritual transformation of stone through stone sculpture in Tuscany. I got to do a really nice away trip to Tuscany to stay with a stone sculptor in a medieval monastery. It's a really, really tough job sometimes. Someone has to do these things. And she was one of the most amazing people I've ever met. These books, they're not really about, well, they are about the sea and woods and stone, but they're about people. And so it's the people, I think, that I remember the most. So she was one of the people that I remember more than anyone. Her name's Emily Young. And if any of you know anything about Pink Floyd, early Pink Floyd anyway, there's a song that Sid Barrett wrote called See Emily Play. She's Emily. She's in her late 70s now. And Sid Barrett saw her in a club in somewhere in London, and I think was a bit obsessed.
So that sounds like a good reading.
So there we go. You could have...
Yeah, people were nodding their heads.
Okay, we're going to go for that. Right, Spirit Carver. So I will... Yeah, I'm going to introduce you to one of her sculptures. 2, 3, 9. This is literally the first time I've read out of this book. Okay, so So this wasn't in her monastery at Siena. This was the first one of her sculptures I saw. She was unveiling a new sculpture in Somerset. It was a good light, an early evening light, and I stood before the head of a figure that was far more imposing than he had seemed as I approached. His eyes closed, long hair flowing beside him. I had to stand back to take in his features properly, the huge and delicate sweeping curves of his forehead and cheeks, the waves of his hair, closed lips and closed eyes. I circled him, observed the way the face emerged from the veined, pitted rock from which he was carved, rough edges becoming smooth skin, a head wearing the raiment of his geology. In the low rays of the setting sun, the bronze sculpture seemed to me to take on the last of the day's warmth, and I was compelled to stay a while longer. In the reddening orange light, the statue's expression, soft and beatific, became radiant, and he seemed to me like a gentle, serious, enigmatic Buddha engaged in some inestimably long form of meditation. I'd learn how to say that word. And I felt moved in a way I had not for some time. I had a moment with the Sun King earlier. I leant into Emily to make myself heard above the conversations being had around us. This was late in the evening. We sat at a long, busy table where dinner had been served and was now being cleared away. The room was loud with talk and drinking and the chink of glasses and plates, of bottles being passed and poured. Emily listened as I struggled to find some words to describe the experience. That happens, she said, fixing me with a bright, piercing gaze, and nodded as though she understood entirely. There is a sort of peacefulness about him, though I'm not sure how much of that was intended. I don't control very much of how it's going to come out. Largely, they are their own creatures. Emily Young, one of the best known of Britain's stone sculptors, would introduce us to the Sun King formally later, though I'd wanted to catch her beforehand. I'd been looking for the person rather than the statue when I came across him, and it seemed rude to leave without first spending some time with the centrepiece, the reason Emily had flown over from her home in southern Tuscany. So it was I found myself alone in that field with the Sun King, the sun setting behind the large bronze. There were others of Emily's sculptures set on plinths all around the gallery, and in the yard outside. Heads, torsos and discs, the three forms she carves again and again. She told me she creates three basic entities. The discs are the sun or the moon, or perhaps the iris. The heads are human consciousness, and the torsos the body of the woman, my physical entity. The statue we had been discussing was the one she had titled The Sun King Dreams of Peace, the figure whom I'd met earlier. Before he was cast in bronze, Emily carved him from a piece of giallo di Siena, stone quarried close to where she lives in Italy. She knew from the start he was going to be an impressive figure, one connected through the colours in the stone and to light. And he came from stone, she said, as he emerged as the Sun King. I had not expected to be so moved by a statue. Truth told, what had drawn me to this place first were words, in particular an essay Emily had written in which she described working with tiny pieces of the planet. That she felt these rocks were kinds of ancestors, made like us, of particles that were born in starbursts, in galactic winds, in that first big bang. I love like her, at that moment. Again, those like the thing with the Fuji. What I find are that those moments where you get unexpectedly moved by something, those are the ones you know have got power. And it was when I had that reaction to that statue that I knew I'd have to spend some time talking to this amazing person who's created something like this that has that power to move me like that. And it took me a good year and a half to get her to kind of warm to me. She's quite she's quite a forceful personality. She's quite private, so it took me a while to gain trust enough, for her to say, right, come and stay. And she said that's the only way you're going to understand, really, is if you see me doing the work, is if you see me picking stone. And so she took me to her monastery, and showed me the stone that she picks out, which literally comes out of the mountains behind her monastery, and it sort of, as the rock behind the monastery erodes, lumps fall out, and she picks them up and she talks to them. And she wondered, and I think she forgot that I was there. She was wandering through this amazing olive grove that was kind of half olive, half oak, and picking up these stones and then having little conversations with them. And she was talking to them like they were people. And she said, well, to me, they are conscious bits of the earth, and I'm in conversation with that bit of the earth at this time. And then she makes them into these just amazing faces. And she keeps all of the imperfections and things like that in them, so that you can see the crystalline structures, or you can see where a crack has formed, and it's very special. So I was looking at this book especially. I think is kind of characterised by serendipity. So just coming across the right thing at the right time. That's one of the many stories.
So how do you find the subjects that you want to cover in the particular books and the people that can communicate their passion and their knowledge in that subject?
So when I get the contract with the publishers, they say, what's this book going to look like? So I have to write down what it's going to look like, and I tell them who I'm going to go and see and what each of the chapters is going to look like. And that's a complete work of fiction, because I have got no idea what that book's going to look like. Usually I have to write a sample chapter. And when I wrote the first book and I sent the draft to my editor, she read the first chapter, which I'd sent her before, and then she read the second chapter and said, hang on, Will, the second chapter you sent me is supposed to be this. I said, yeah, just stick with it. And then she phoned me again. She said, Will, it's also supposed to be just about Cornwall and Scilly. Why are you in the Arctic? It will all make sense. So I tend to find that you go and see someone and you chat with them. So the first person I went to see in this was Jane Dark, the filmmaker. And she was talking to me about her relationship with the sea at Porthcothan, where she and Nick Dark lived. And at the end of that conversation, she said, oh, you have to go and talk to so-and-so. And then that person says, oh, you must talk to this person. And you find that you get kind of pushed in different directions. And so some of it is just listening for, oh, does that sound interesting? Does that sound like it could go somewhere? Lots of these books are really exercises in listening, extreme listening. And it's patient and it's slow and you've got to wait until the story happens. So with Emily, it took a year and a half. There's the other person who's in here who I didn't think, right up until the end, I didn't think this was going to happen, but I walked the Stands of Stones route, which is on the Pennine watershed, which is a series of poems that Simon Armitage wrote, and it had them carved into rock along a 50-mile stretch of the Pennine watershed, which is close to where I grew up. And I walked with different people along the way. Each of the days that I walked, someone else joined me, and Simon had said, "Oh, well, I'll meet you and we'll do another walk." And then at the last minute, he dumped me for Richard Ashcroft. Okay. Richard Ashcroft. Which he name drops as well, as though it made a difference who it was. But I was glad that he dumped me for someone famous. And I thought, and then he said, "But don't worry, we'll catch up in a few weeks, and when I'm free again." And then he dumped me again for someone else. And this happened sort of over months and months and months. And I thought, Simon really does not want to talk. He kept saying, "Anytime, Will. Anytime I'll talk to you." And then every time I set something up, he said, "Yeah, but not that time." And then he got in touch out of the blue and said, "Right, I'm free." And we ended up talking on Zoom, and it was one of the most brilliant interviews that I had, because I'd done the whole walk, and I walked with so many different people and listened to their stories. I could then talk to him about how different people reacted to those poems. and it just came together right at the right time, and it was about 4 days before the manuscript had to be in, so I had to rejig that chapter, but it's so much better for it. And so there are things that you plan for, things that don't work, things that you think are going to work, or people you think, yeah, you're going to be amazing, and then they can't. They sometimes put a barrier up. It's especially people who are, like with the sea book, it's full of people who aren't professionally involved with the sea, because lots of people who are really, if that's their job and their life, they have almost like a narrative that they tell about what they do, because lots of people ask them about it, and it's really difficult for them to get beyond it. Whereas where it worked might be things like, I'm supposed to be talking about whales and dolphins with Abby Crosby from Wildlife Trust. She's not there anymore, but she was there. And we ended up talking about having seriously ill children and sitting on the cliffs and crying. And we did genuinely say, we didn't see any dolphins, we didn't see any whales, but we talked about the thing that we needed to talk about, which wasn't the thing we'd planned, so it made a completely different chapter. And then you've got to go back to that person and say, right, the chapter I've written is quite different to what we expected. And so with each of those people, my first point is, well, I've written it, and it can stay just between us two, because that's not what we agreed. You've said some very personal things, and if you don't want that, go any further. And then she sat in it for a while and then came back to me and said, no, it's right. It's vulnerable, but it's right. And so some of it is about trying to kind of vulnerability match. It's like if other people are going to be vulnerable in front of me, then I've got to be vulnerable. I've got to bring more of myself to that. So none of it's really planned. There's a kind of weird serendipitous weaving that goes on, and I don't really quite understand how it works, but it does.
So if I was to start writing a book about boat building, would you be a good person to speak to, considering you're not yet an expert, but you are building a boat? I'm
not yet an expert. That implies that one day I will be an expert, Frank. I'm never going to be an expert. So that's the project I'm working on at the moment, is I'm restoring a 1962 wooden wayfarer boat to take on a very challenging voyage. I'm also doing it in public. So I'm doing it at the National Maritime Museum, so you can come and see me fail. Or no, what I mean is see me try. And yes, but that's a brilliant example of how my process works, which is I come up with an idea and I think this is how it's going to work, and then it works out in a completely different way. So I thought it would be me in the back of a shed somewhere thinking, what on earth have I done? But instead, I'm doing this in the museum's workshop with the boat volunteers, who are brilliant, who are people who have, they've learned lots of the skills that they're now helping me to understand. They know how to use tools. They keep on very gently saying things like, "That's an interesting way of using a plane run. If you turn it round, it will actually do the cutting." And they do it in a really gentle way that makes me not feel terrible about not knowing how to use tools. So what's happened, instead of it being me trying to explore this concept that I'm looking at the moment, which is seaworthiness, is what does it mean to be seaworthy in our own lives? Which I thought it was going to be me struggling with my own sense of bewilderment in the world at the moment, which is a bewildering place. It's a community of people who are talking about seaworthiness, and it's a community of people who are coming together to explore this idea, and the boat kind of becomes like a little magnet for that. And so it's all of these conversations that I'm having, and all of these people who are talking to me about what seaworthiness means to them, is making this book into a completely different thing. So I only plan so much, and then the story kind of builds. So yeah, I'm not a planner. I don't have this idea about what this book's going to be. I don't know where this book's going to finish. My idea is that this boat is going to be in a seaworthy enough state to sail from here down the coast to Penzance and then across 30 miles of open ocean to the Isles of Scilly. That's my idea. I've got no idea if that's where I'll end up. Maybe I'll end up in, Tahiti or something. If I miss Scilly, what's the next island mass? I don't know. It's a long way. It's probably America, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, who knows where it'll end up? But it's the adventure of it. Yeah.
And you've got it as a documentary as well, I believe.
Yes. So I'm working. So out of all of these different conversations, and the boat being the kind of magnet, I'm working in collaboration with loads of different people. So I'm working with a student filmmaker from the university who is making a documentary about the process. And working with illustrators, so I've given some of the boat's hull over to some student illustrators, and they're going to be let loose on that in the next few weeks, which means I've got to paint the thing. We've got photographers involved, artists, loads of collaborations. But yeah, it's quite a visual thing, so I thought filming it would be an important way of adding to that story.
And so the book will not be in the series of this.
No, this is the end.
This is it.
So yeah, I always thought this would be a trilogy. I say it's the end. Maybe in a few years I'll come back and say, well, okay, I didn't do anything on air. Maybe I'll build an aeroplane. My dad actually phoned me up the other day and said, you're not going to do that, are you? Please don't build an aeroplane, that would be bad. He said he started having nightmares about boats, so he said that then he had a nightmare about me building a plane. Anyway, so yes, it's not in the same series, but it's still non-fiction, and it's still partly about my story, partly about other people's, because I think that I don't know, I just get this sense that what we're very good at as humans is we're very good at being on transmit, like I am now. I'm very good at being on transmit, but I think, I don't know, if I do anything, I try and listen in these books, and I think that will continue with the next book. It's listening to people really carefully, and trying to get, what do you really say? What are you saying behind the words? What's the story behind the story?
And what's the story behind not writing fiction anymore, having been a long-listed booker? That's a sort of acclaim early on in someone's career that they look to capitalise on, but you seem to have pivoted to non-fiction.
Yeah, it's probably a neurodivergent thing. I'm not very good at sticking at one thing for a time. You've done it. I've done novels. Then short stories. I've done short stories. Now I've done non-fiction. Poetry. No, I like change. It keeps it fresh. I still write fiction. I still write short stories. I've got the notebook that I'm writing this new book in has got my non-fiction in the front of it, and it's got my short stories in the back, because I keep on having ideas for new short stories. I'm still planning on writing an anthology of short stories. Again, time. But yeah, I'm not sure. I think novels are incredibly difficult. They are. The many was kind of a gift in terms of the book, the story. I knew what the story was. I knew what it was. One of those, but I just had to write it. I just had to, almost like I was transcribing it, because it was all in my head. Foxfires that book is 56,000 words, and I think I wrote somewhere in the region of 280,000 words, and got rid of all of the others until it just distilled into those 54,000. And I wrote that book probably 6 times from scratch in different ways. And I'm really pleased with it, but it was so much work. If I'm proud of one thing I've written, Foxfires is the one I really like that book. It just happened to be that it came out on the same day, I think, that the first of the COVID lockdowns happened. And so it sank without a trace. Because rightfully everyone was concerned about, what was going on, but there were no booksellers open. And, booksellers, I rely on booksellers selling these books by hand. They hand them to people and say, you have to read this book. And so, but very few people had read that, but I really liked it as a novel. And I had to create a city and rules and politics and laws and folklore. And I wrote a guidebook to the city. It's not a language, but it's the language that people speak in the city actually has grammar. So I had to create a grammar for a language. It was really, really detailed. Crazy work that probably no one who reads it will know how much went into it. But yeah, I take the writing bit of it really, really. I take it really seriously, and you have to have an idea the right size for a novel, and I don't have one at the moment. I've got ideas for the short story size, but yeah, you've got to wait for a big one for a novel. I might write another novel. I probably will. I've got an idea I have got an idea for a novel set on a space station, where I really want to write a sci-fi novel in which it's all about sort of it's like a soap, but set on a space station where people argue over a dishwasher. And it's not to do with the space or the technologies, it's to do with all of the little things that annoy you about life, that actually we go to space and we just take all of those little annoyances with us. And I've been playing with that for ages. I've got a psychic detective novel in my head as well. So yeah, there are novels there. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's just, if I could have another one of me, if I could have the novel me, that'd be really nice. They could keep on going with the novels, and then there could be the short story me, and then there could be the non-fiction me.
And then there could be the going around and having adventures and...
Yeah. And I could go around and have the adventures. Yeah. The other me's, right, is there anyone here with that sort of knowledge? That would be useful if we've got someone in clothing, perhaps. I'd like that. No, that would be a terrible idea. More of me, that would be chaos.
Are you happy to give us another little reading?
Yeah, what would you like?
Heart of the Woods.
Yeah, okay. Any particular... Does anyone have a particular thing they'd be interested in? What I've got stuff about fire, about Japan, about scaring myself witless in a woods.
I found the woven coffins. I found that very powerful.
Okay. I don't think I've read from that before, but I will. Ooh. Got to find it first. Talking with yourself. Okay. So there's a story behind this story, actually. So this book starts on my dad's small holding in North Wales, and the woodland that he planted at the same time that my son was born. And so I've watched the trees and my son grow up alongside each other. And my dad has really thrown himself into the smallholder's life. And it's quite an alternative place where he lives. And when one of their neighbours died, this guy's wife came over and said, Richard, I'd like you to do the funeral. And he said, okay. He said, we'd also like you to bury him. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll bring him over later. And she brought this guy's body round to his house, and my dad, his wife was out, and he put this guy on the kitchen table, and he anointed the body, and then wrapped the body, and he did it all properly. He looked into how to do these things. Never done anything like it before. And they had a willow coffin woven for him, and then conducted a woodland burial for him. But the people involved didn't want to talk about that story, because that was their small community story. And what I don't want to do is to pry, but I really, really like the story. And so I looked closer to home and found out that there is a woodland burial, well, there were a couple of woodland burial grounds in Cornwall. So I went up to Pentiddy and talked to Elle and Anthony Waters, who do woodland burials, and they get their coffins from a local coffin weaver who takes willow from the burial ground that they grow there, and then she weaves that into coffins, and then they bury that in the same woodland, which I just think has that kind of beautiful circularity about it. And they agreed to talk, and we spent a really, really good day. Do you want a bit about the coffins itself, or about Pentiddy? That's the question. What do you want?
Whatever you feel.
Okay, we'll go for the burial ground. So this is from Willow Weaver. I have my feet up on the sill of the open door of an Arga, a mug of tea held between both hands. I'm in the kitchen of Ellen Anthony Waters, whose house sits at the heart of the 27-acre woodland they've made their home at Pentiddy, near the former Cornish mining village of Pensilva. Ellie is next to me, her feet on the stove too, warming herself after a dip in the pond outside the house, the temperature of which is just a few degrees above freezing on an early March morning. The morning plunge is a small ritual to start the day with the others who live and work there. Life at Pentiddy revolves around such small moments. Just before I arrived, the team had finished their second morning ritual, which involved talking about the little misunderstandings that may have taken place the day before, and things they might have said in haste that upset someone else. It is a chance to make things right before the new day begins. A performative starting again. These rituals are small, practical starting points for a small, practical community, a way of helping them to run along together. So just imagine that, but set in a space station. If the house feels as though it's sprung up from the ground, it is because, to an extent, it has. It was built entirely by hand, with a roundwood timber frame infilled with straw bale walls by the couple and a team of volunteers some 20 years ago. Almost every part of it, from the trunks that form the structural beams to the hay bales, was sourced from the surrounding area. As neither of us wants to leave the warmth of the stove, Ellie is now giving me the armchair tour, which ends at the centrepiece of the kitchen table, where there is a small wreath of willow growing in a shallow bowl. We do this every Imulk, Ellie tells me. Whoever's here at the time, we put our intentions into willow wands, and then weave them together as a community. We speak them aloud and put the wreath into water, and those intentions sprout. We can watch them grow. We've always done little rituals like that here. It is a few days past Imulk, which on the Celtic wheel of the year is the festival that takes place at the peak of winter, at its tipping point, after which spring will begin to make itself known. What I really, really loved about talking to Ellie was that all of these little rituals were just woven into everything that they did, and they were very intentional about it. And she said that included sort of her plans for dying. She had just written her death plan, which she had shared with her family, and she said, well, this is what I want to happen when I die. I want to be brought back to this place. I want to be carried across the threshold one last time, and I want to be buried here, where we've lived. And so in this chapter, it was really about talking about death, which we don't like to do society. It's not. We don't find it comfortable, which is strange, because it is the one thing that happens to all of us. And so I loved her way of sort of facing that head on and talking about what a good death might look like, and the fact that was connected to the woods and connected to this place. They're never intended to be a burial ground. She told me, she said that it was someone had rocked up when they bought the land, and they'd intended to grow wood for charcoal and things like that. And someone had rocked up and said, "Oh, can I be buried here?" And they thought, "Well, why not? We've got enough land for that. But there aren't any rules against it." And she said, not long after that they buried their first customer, for sure. The police rocked up and said, "We've heard there's a dead body on the here." And we said, "Well, yes, there is." And said, "We buried him," and told them the story. And yeah, and it sort of rolled from there. And these two police officers who came over ended up saying, "Oh, we think we know someone who would like to be buried here as well." Sort of one thing leads to another. And it sounds like it could be a bit of a dark chapter, but it really isn't. It's full of life, and it's full of humour, and
like you say, openness as well. It's a discussion that they are so comfortable having. It's really setting a good example for the rest of us.
And I know there's a bit of a movement towards, there's death cafes, and there's some brilliant podcasts around talking about death as death studies at university. One of my former students on the MA at Falmouth is from last year is writing a book about what a good death looks like. Alex Dunkley, who lives in Newland, who's a brilliant writer, but also a celebrant, and so she talks about these things really, really, really well. The privilege of this is getting to listen to people's stories, and those little moments where they let you into their life for a bit.
So let's open it up to the audience here, and if anybody has a question or yes.
Hey there. I'm wondering if you've got any advice about how to get the best from people when you're talking to them. And you said about really deeply listening.
Yeah.
What would your advice be for that?
That's a big topic.
I know, isn't it?
So there are things that I do. So I have a kind of ethical framework. I'm very clear with people when I talk to them that anything they say, they have the right to retract. It's not. So I used to be a journalist. I trained as a journalist, and when I go out as a journalist, I'm there to get a particular story, and so I go with really clear questions. And also, with journalism, you don't really have the right to retract after you've said something. It's on the record. Whereas this is all by permission. I want people to feel free to say something and then later on say, "Do you know what, I don't think I said that right." Like they want to go away and think about it and maybe say, maybe I'm not happy about that going on the page. But what I find is by giving people that option and saying that this is in your hands and I will show you everything I write before it goes into publication. So there's a long process of sharing drafts with people and giving them the right to say, "Oh yeah, I said that, but what I meant was this." That then doesn't happen. And that then makes people, I think, feel free to say whatever they want. Because it has to be about trust. They have to trust that I'm going to treat their words carefully. And that I'm going to do something with them that is worthwhile, that it's worth telling me that story. And some of it is about questions. I don't have questions because I don't know what the story is. I don't know what the story is until they've started to open up about it. So my job is not to ask questions really, is sometimes it's just to say, "Could you tell me a bit more about that?" And to show interest, to maybe help them to open up a little bit about something, or maybe to express something they haven't thought about. But it's really slow. It's a slow process. And some people feel comfortable doing it, some people don't feel comfortable doing it. I find the more I do it, the more people seem to open up, which is really lovely. But again, it's all in there. Everyone has the right to say at the end, "Do you know what, let's take back the whole thing." And I think just giving other people the power makes them more comfortable. And some of it is it can feel really awkward when someone leaves a long pause. But being really comfortable with that is useful, because, and as a journalist, what we learned, one of the best journalistic techniques I ever learned was just to stop talking. If you stop talking, someone will fill the silence. But I use that in a much gentler way, which is if we walk for a bit, and actually walking, so I don't sit facing someone. I never sit facing someone. It's always alongside. It's like if I want to have chats with my kids, like in the car. Yeah, is because it's safe. They're facing. We're both facing that way. We can say things almost out into the world that way, and it's almost like we're not. We are communicating, but we're communicating side by side, and it's not confrontational. So I walk with people, or I do the thing that if we're like when I was with I think it's Jessie, who was weaving the coffins. I can't do the weaving of the coffins, but I can stand by her while she's weaving the coffins rather than opposite her. I can be focusing my attention on something else to let her open. Yeah, it's a big topic, but that's in brief. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Hi, I'm Trish. Years ago, you used to read at Telltales?
Sorry?
Read at Telltales?
Yes.
Yes. And I just wondered if you thought that was part of the development of you being a writer, those sort of things. It's for readers and writers. And did you find that it helped you develop your style, your voice? Could you see from people's faces what they liked and what they didn't like? I'm just interested in the process.
Yes. So reading aloud definitely does help. Yeah, because you it's hard to. I find it hard to do when I'm developing work. So but if I finish something, almost it's too late. But when I'm reading at like festivals and things like that, I'm always watching the audience. I know the piece well enough usually to read it without having to look at the work, because I'm just waiting for what's landing, what are people interested in? Because actually, if they're interested in that, maybe we can steer things in that particular direction. So I use it as a tool. But I don't tend to share stuff that's in early progress with audiences, because it's not ready yet. And I've got this idea in my head, I think, more of what I want it to be, or it feels right to be. And that's mostly a closed thing for me. I need to develop the voice bit on my own. But I like those events. I like sharing. I think reading. I think writing is not a solo art, and it's only. It's only a book when it finds a reader. It's only and so when you're reading a story to someone, you're doing it as a collaboration. So yeah, I think, and when you watch really good storytellers, that's a totally different art. I love people who can tell a story. I wrote a story for Radio 4 a few months ago, and the Cornish actor Tristan Sturrock read that, and he way elevated what I'd written. It was brilliant to hear, because again, a good reader can really change the feel of a piece, and then you get a performance element. I've kind of gone off topic of what you said, but it's all to do with sharing. So yes, but things like Telltales are brilliant, because and it gives you confidence. It's a testing ground. But the more you read aloud, the more comfortable you get reading aloud. What I ought to have done today is bring my reading glasses, is what I realised. It's because I don't have my reading glasses in, so most of those words were swimming in front of my eyes. Practicalities, got to think about those too.
Anybody willing to put out a final question for us? So you've won an award. What was your experience like being a judge? Recently you were a judge of the Winston Graham Historical Fiction Award.
That's horrible. That's really horrible. It's awful. Being a judge on a literary award because you're judging people's. I mean, you're judging things that people have spent years and years slaving over, and you know how much effort they put into them. And also, when you start reading these books and start having to decide between a historical novel set in the 1960s or one set in the 1300s, how am I going to judge between those two books? So on one hand, I really dislike the idea that we give something a prize because they're totally different things. You're judging. The only similarity is that there are words on the page in a way.
But also you're judging with a group of other people as well, aren't you?
Well, that's the bit I loved, because then we had an argument. And because we had loads of arguments. And what I do like is debate about writing. I like it when people get passionate. And so it was a group of people who were really passionate about books and stories and writing, what good writing meant. So it was like someone describes it as being in the best book group ever. So you've got like Patrick Gale and crikey, who else was there? Charlotte Marsden and people like that who really know their stuff. And so, yeah, I enjoyed that. I just don't enjoy that, other books have to lose. But then at the same time, I'm lucky that, some of my books have won awards and have been shortlisted or longlisted for awards. I remember when my first book got longlisted for the Booker, and they invited me to this series of parties in London, and I went to the parties, and then I turned up and one of the shortlisted writers, I can't remember who it was, said, "Oh, the longlisters never turn up to these parties because they're all really offended because they haven't got on the shortlist." Like, what do you mean? I get to go to a fancy party. And I get to meet cool authors. I'm going to go to every party that they invite me to. And what happened on one of the parties, which was for the shortlisted, it was shortlisted writers that I also got invited to. I was the only longlister who went, but I'm going to every party. It was my birthday, and someone found out, so they brought out a birthday cake and asked me to give a speech, which I gave in the style of accepting the Booker Award, which some people got and some people didn't. I heard someone next to me say, "He thinks he's won the Booker." That's the whole point. But yes, so but I don't think like that. It was such a massive thing to even be put on one of those lists for me, and so I don't think it's lovely to win awards. It's lovely to be shortlisted or longlisted for them. It massages the ego.
And bringing back together, it's closing it up in the thinking that this is another world, like your experience meeting the author is. These things are actually possible, and they're not out of reach of us. Yeah,
absolutely. And I would never ever have expected that I could, if I could tell the sort of 13, 14-year-old me what I would be doing in a few years, he would definitely have choice words. And there'd be two of them. They'd be both quite short and Anglo-Saxon, because he was a chippy Mancunian, and yeah, he would have told me there's no way you can do that, not a chance. And if I'd have believed him, I think, I think I never would have put pen to paper. But what I know from listening to people through these books especially is that everyone's got amazing stories to tell. And I think that I don't think there's anything. It's a low bar to entry. You need a pen and a paper, and that's how you just put words on the page. And yeah, well, if I can do it, I'm genuinely anyone can.
Well, thanks for telling us some of your amazing stories tonight, and hopefully everybody enjoyed that and show our appreciation.
Thank you so much for coming out this evening, and thank you, Frank.
My pleasure.
Wonderful questions. Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, thank you to Jane and the library as well for hosting us.
And interestingly, you talked about Patrick Gale, so you sort of bookending each other in this series of talks.
which we book in the cafe.
So yeah, we've got a couple more talks that have got tickets available. So we've got Liz Fennick
in
two next time. And if you
And
enjoyed my questioning, you'll want to experience it again.
And Liz is great too.
And the week after that, we've got Cathy Benson Free. Unfortunately, for those that would like to come to the Patrick House, unless you've already got a ticket book, we've now got a waiting list.
And Cathy's very good as well.
Cathy's
very
fantastic.
fantastic. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Really comfortable.
Thank you so much.